Hare Krishna. We're studying from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 5, entitled Vidura's Talks with Maitreya. And we're on Text 8, Chapter 5, Canto 3, Srimad Bhagavatam. It's April 23rd, 2023. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
We're here at Mother Malini's Bhakti Yoga Retreat Ashram in Alachua, Florida, with Gajendra Prabhu and Mother Malini. Online, there's Kelly, Garuda, perhaps also Damayanti's there, Parampara, and Lakshmi Priya Devi Dasi, and Kristen Beaver, and Bhakti Oasis, so that's Bhakti George, perhaps Bhakti Danielle's also there, and Maina and Ramachandra from Haaretz Yisrael are here. Welcome. And Mother Rohini just joined us online. So we're studying from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 5, Text 8. Yai Tattva Bedai Adilokanata Lokan Alokan Saha Lokapalan Achiklipat Yatra Hi Sarva Sattva Nikaya Bedha Adikrita Pratita Yas Tattva Beder Adilokanato Lokana Lokan Sahaloka Palan Chiklipadyatra Hi Sarva Sattva Nikaya Bedo Dikrita Pratita Yas Tattva Beder Adilokanato Lokana Lokan Sahaloka Palan Achiklipadyatra Hi Sarva Sattva Nikaya Bedo Dikrita Pratita Yas Tattva Beder Adilokanato Lokana Lokan Sahaloka Palan Achiklipadyatra Hi Sarva Sattva Nikaya Bedo Dikrita Pratita
Yastattva Beder Adilokanato
Yastattva Beder Adilokanato
Lokam Sahalokapalan
Lokana Lokan Sahaloka Palan
Achiklipadyatra Sarva Sattva
Achiklipadyatra Hi Sarva Sattva
Nikaya Bedo Dikrita Patitaha
Nikaya Bedo Dikrita Pratita Would anyone online like to recite the verse? It's Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 5, Text 8. Going once, twice. Okay. So we'll go to the word meanings. Yai.
Yai.
By whom?
By whom?
Tattva.
Tattva.
Truth.
Truth.
Vedai.
Vedai.
By differentiation.
By differentiation.
Adiloka Nata.
Adilokanata.
The king of the kings.
The kings of the kings.
Lokan.
Lokan.
Planets.
Planet.
Alokan.
Alokan.
Planets of the lower region.
Planets of the lower regions.
Saha.
Saha.
Along with.
Along with.
Lokapalan.
Lokapala.
Respective kings.
Respective kings.
Achiklipat.
Achiklipat.
Planned.
Planned.
Yatra.
Yatra.
Wherein.
Wherein.
He.
He.
Certainly.
Certainly.
Sarva.
Sarva.
All.
All.
Sattva.
Sattva.
Existence.
Existence.
Nikaya.
Nikaya.
Living entities.
Living entities.
Veda.
Veda.
Difference.
Difference.
Adikrita.
Adikrita.
Occupied.
Occupied.
Patita.
Patita.
It so appears.
So appears.
Yes. Translation. The supreme king of all kings has created different planets and places of habitation where living entities are situated in terms of the modes of nature and work, and he has created their different kings and rulers. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Lord Krishna is the chief king of all kings, and he has created different planets for all kinds of living entities. Even on this planet, there are different places for inhabitation by different types of men. There are places like deserts, icelands, and valleys in mountainous countries, and in each of them there are different kinds of men born of different modes of nature according to their past deeds. There are people in the Arabian deserts and in the valleys of the Himalayan mountains, and the inhabitants of these two places differ from one another, just as the inhabitants of the Icelands also differ from them. Similarly, there are also different planets. The planets below the earth down to the Patala planet are full of various kinds of living beings. No planet is vacant, as wrongly imagined by the modern so-called scientist. In Bhagavad Gita, we find it is said by the Lord that all the living entities are sarvagata, or present in every sphere of life. So there is no doubt that on other planets there are also inhabitants like us, sometimes with greater intelligence and greater opulence. The living conditions for those of greater intelligence are more luxurious than on this earth. There are also planets where no sunlight reaches, and there are living entities who must live there due to their past deeds. All such plans for living conditions are made by the Supreme Lord. And Vidura requested Maitreya to describe this for the sake of further enlightenment. Om Angana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Upakadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuttapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Saganaraganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitan Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitam Cha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagat Pate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Hanamami Hari Priya Panchakalpata Yubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanan Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyabadi Paschatya Desha Tarine. Nayanam Namaskricha Naram Shaivanavotamam Devim Sarasvatim Vyasam Tatojam Udiryat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should first offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Sarasvati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta Prayesh Vabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevya Bhagavat Utamashloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 5, Text 8. Yais Tattva Veder Adi Lokanato Lokana Lokansa Lokapalan Ajiklipad Yatra Hi Sarva Sattva Nikaya Bedo Dikrita Pratita. The Supreme King of all kings has created different planets and places of habitation where living entities are situated in terms of the modes of nature and work, and he has created their different kings and rulers. Hare Krishna. Welcome Anandini, Rukmini, and Rohini, who joined us in recent minutes. Okay, so one thing I noticed is in the word for word, in the translation, in the first sentence of the purport, there's this term, King of Kings, Adi Lokanata. Prabhupada starts the purport, Lord Krishna is the chief king of all kings, and he's created different planets for all kinds of living entities. So to me, that has this king of kings has a very Old Testament ring to it, a very Old Testament ring. I did not grow up in like religious Judaism, but even in the secular form, and you go to synagogue for Yom Kippur or Bar Mitzvah, and then in the prayer book, you have this expression a lot, O King of Kings, or if my namesake would be David Hamelech, King David, and so Melech Malchai, King of Kings, or Melech Malchai Hamelechim, King of Kings. So you could have the kings, then you have an emperor who's like the king of the kings, but then there's the Melech Malchai HaMelechim, the king of the kings. Okay, so that's God. Yeah, I'm sure it's in the New Testament too, referring to like Jesus and Jesus's father. But so it has a very Old Testament feel to it. And Srila Prabhupada, he uses language like that. I know it's probably 2 or 3 years ago when we were at the beginning of Vidura and his whole pilgrimage and like that. Prabhupada he said that Vidura was doing the Pilgrim's Progress, which we can imagine it's a book by John Bunyan, very wonderful, very deep book about the process of anartha-nivritti and spiritual life from maybe the 1600s, like a little bit after Shakespeare. We can imagine that at Scottish Churches College. Prabhupada, that was one of the books he studied, like that. So Prabhupada takes English from these different very sublime places, Old Testament, New Testament, and quality literature from really the early days of modern English, like that. And so, okay, so King of Kings, yes, and yes, Anandini, right? King of Kings and Lord of Lords, glory. Yes, okay, very biblical. All right, so okay, so everyone, I would say, like yesterday, a theme of Mother Malini's class yesterday, a theme of Mother Malini's class was like, distinction between, other animals and humans. And it was like a theme in Atado Brahma Jigyasa. We get to involve ourselves in more than eating, sleeping, mating, defending. And maybe like another distinction, very related, is this King of Kings concept. Because I would say, at least to a large extent, other species, they can have a sense of who's the king. They can have a sense, they can have a sense of who's the master. Okay. Yeah. So like whatever, the dog can say like, he feeds me. He feeds me. I'll please him. He's the master. He's got a stick. Fear. Okay. More powerful than me. Right. It's like other species, they can have a sense of who's the boss. Okay. Of course, that's classic. I mean, we can look at where the hierarchy is reversed. I'm reminded of like very old days sitcoms. I'm not much in the TV world. Let's say like a 1950s sitcom. Okay, 1950s sitcom. It's like the standard hierarchy is the man is the head of the household. But in the sitcoms, the woman quietly always has him wrapped around her finger. Okay, so like she's really so the parents, they're the master of the children. But in the sitcoms, the children are always tricking and they're really controlling the thing, and the parents are just kind of trying to figure things out. But the real controller in the house, controlling the children too, is the dog. Is the dog. Okay. Yeah, right, exactly. Okay. So, but anyhow, so there's the conventional hierarchy. So even other species, they can have a sense of who's the boss, but other species will have no sense of who's the boss of the boss, who's the king of the king. So that's distinctively human, because we can have a sense like, oh, he pays my salary and I have this lifestyle, so I better, he's like the boss. Or the children understand, okay, mom and dad feed me. That's like that. But then in the human form, we can have a sense like, okay, so even though like he's the head of this company and he's my supervisor and like that, but he has his boss. And his boss has his boss. So like we can go there. Animals don't go there. So like it's another way of like distinctiveness of this special human form, like that. All right, and then we're probably all familiar. It's just like such a common argument. Prabhupada uses it. Philosophers for ages and ages and millennium have used it. The argument from level of structure, level of organization. We use it a lot. Right? If we look at this watch, then how did it form? Did the wind just blow by chance? No. There's an engineer. There's a crafts person. There's science. There's intelligence behind the watch. Okay, so we know that the level of organization, the level of structure of, let's say, the human brain, or the veins of a leaf, or even a cell. What is the rotation of the planets is far, 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 far trillions of times more sophisticated than this watch. So logic is that. So the intelligence behind the veins of the leaf, or the creation of the human brain, is much greater than behind this watch. That's logic. That's logic, and it's a pretty common argument to establish like that. Logically, it makes sense that there's some higher intelligence like that. So then interestingly, my Paritagena, Asaram Bhavamashvita. So like those, like those who are supposedly have the most intelligence, they'll tend, I don't want to overly generalize, they'll tend to deny that there's any higher intelligence, even though it's just a basic rational, it's a simple logical argument, So, okay. So we can look there that's so that's the envy factor. Okay, that's the envy factor. that, yeah, simply that, because like we can look at what our intelligence, each of us can look at what our intelligence, oh, I created this, you know, I'm scheduling this, here's something, whether we're in the field of science or art or business, you know, we can look at what our intelligence creates. But then it's just like when we get to like king of the king of the king of the king, you know, again, like even one cell, the structure of one cell, the simplest cell, even an inorganic atom, is just like I mean, each decade there's discovering more subatomic parts, and that's inorganic matter. What to speak of organic and not organics? Just one cell is just far trillions of times beyond, you know, the sophisticated computer. And like I don't understand this computer, but you know, some people understand this computer and the circuitry. So, and there's just like one cell, one atom, and then there's just like unlimited, like trillions and trillions and Googles and Google. Google is one with 100 zeros, right? How many atoms? So it just gets to be like, no, this isn't like, well, maybe someone a little smarter than me did that. No, this isn't. So even though it makes no sense logically or philosophically or in terms of rational thinking, out of envy, I'll just deny that. So there just couldn't be an intelligence that much. It's the frog in the well. Prabhupada would use the frog in the well in a metaphor. There just couldn't be intelligence that far beyond like that. So therefore it all happened by chance with a big explosion of nothing, and there was the soup, the primary. Everyone knows it's just, and so we can see just like I'm just shut down the fact that there could be an intelligence that greater than mine because I pride myself on my intelligence. So okay. Yeah, and then, well, it's fascinating purport. Prabhupada talks about the Arabian deserts and the valleys of the Himalaya. Purport goes spiritually and it goes across the cosmos and like that. And so different planets. And so Prabhupada's referring here to would be verse text 24 of chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita. Achejo yama dayo yama klejo shoshe vicha nichasarvagata stanura chaloyam sanatana. Right? So Krishna says there's life everywhere. There's life everywhere. And so so this Bhagavatam verse from Vidura kind of points to that, and Prabhupada's expanding on that. So Vidura says, where living entities are situated in terms of the modes of nature and work, he has created their different kings and rulers, different planets, places of habitation. Prabhupada talks about Iceland and Greenland and the deserts like that. So there's a verse from Brahma Samhita, and Prabhupada quotes a lot to illustrate, there's different planets, and that's probably, even we look at this planet, right? There's living entities in water. Even if we look just the human species, there's in the northern reaches of Alaska, right? And then at the equator, in heat, and so there's different living entities according to desire and deserve. Yam yam vapi samabhavam tyajat yanti klevam tam tam eveti kunte sadatad bhava bhavita. Whatever state of consciousness we develop, we get a particular body in a particular species, in a particular conditions, in a particular planet, in a particular place on a planet. So Lord Brahma says in his Sri Brahma Samhita, Yasya prabha prabhavato jagadanda koti Kotishvashesha vasudadi vibhutabhinam tad brahma nishkalamanantamashesha bhutam govindamadipurusham amaham bhajami. That, yes, he says he's a servant of Krishna who through his different age and different energies, his different, through really the Brahman effulgence is the root of material existence, and Lord Krishna is the substratum of the super soul and the Paramatma and the Brahman effulgence. Yes. So the different planetary systems and different conditions on each planet, just as it's described here. All right, so this, and so when I read in the purport here just now, there are also planets where no sunlight reaches, and there are living entities who must live there due to their past deeds. We have, of course, as part of our transformative coach training school, Bhagavad Gita, yogic principles and transformative coaching. And in that course, related to that verse from the second chapter we just referenced, because Prabhupada references it, the Nitya Sarvagatasthana. So we have a question. And in that question, I developed that question back 15 years ago, because I saw something on internet which relates to these places where the sunlight never reaches. So, okay, so this is probably interesting, right? So there's the scientific theories and understanding about where life can exist and where life cannot exist. So there was a theory that life cannot exist in certain conditions, in carbon-based life and this and that. And then back around 2008 on the internet, I saw an article it was a scientist named Jill Mikuki. She's a professor. Her name is Mikuki. That's the way I would pronounce it. And so they're in deep in the Antarctic, and there's a place deep in the Antarctic called Red Blood Falls. Red blood, because some of you got those white polar caps, then there's this veins of red stuff, and they couldn't quite figure it out. But I don't have the science, the chemistry all understood, but anyhow, so what they discovered back in 2009, 2008 is because there's these places where there's no sun, there's no oxygen, there's no place for photosynthesis. There's so life could not exist there. But ta-da, they found living entities there, and then they need to change their theories. They found living entities where life could not exist, and because there wasn't the oxygen, it was too cold, like that. And then so we had a whole question. We had a question based on that verse from Bhagavad Gita they probably refer, because Krishna says life exists everywhere, right? So maybe, according to science, maybe Krishna knows what he's talking about. Okay, let's just be open to that. Okay, so and then a little later, maybe 12 years ago, because there's theories about life can exist up to certain temperatures, right? And then in some underground volcanic ash where the temperature is hundreds of degrees more than where life can exist. They found living entities. Shocking, right? Okay. So then again, they need to change their theories. So, all right. So, yeah. So we have that simple statement from Krishna, Nitya Sarvagatasthana, Chalayam Sanatana, that life exists everywhere. And we so many Prabhupada will say well, there's life in water, right? There's sea life. There's life on there. There's life in air. You got the birds, right? You get life in ether. So right. So Prabhupada's logic, so of course life exists in fire. So let's say in the education I got, I think well, this is just some, this is just some primitive Bengali who's like that. But no, it's a much higher scientific understanding. Okay, so yeah. So so that's well this relates to authority. This relates to authority. So the Vedas describe different, what's called epistemologies, different ways to know. And so one thing I feel very glad about, if I have a few drops of advancement, it's just I've come to trust Prabhupada as my authority in the fields of everything. Okay. And so that's I'm so I feel encouraged about that. And so yeah, because we're just giving a few examples here where it's a kind of what Prabhupada's giving. Prabhupada's not making anything up. He's giving what Krishna's giving. He's giving what the Vedas are giving, in ways for us to understand. We can give so many, like, let's say, so where it's like, okay, so science is coming around to like, actually, there can be life in fire. Okay, well, so the Vedic epistemology, we're recommended to accept Shabda Brahman as the ultimate authority. Shabda Brahman means basically the Vedas, the Bhagavatam. These are the realizations of fully realized souls. Okay, so they're not subject to the defects of making mistakes and cheating, so that people will admire me, or limitations, or imperfections. So to accept Vedic authority through our current link to the Parampara, the disciplic succession, Srila Prabhupada. And there are other types of ways of getting knowledge. And there's pratyaksha, which means sense perception. There's anumana, which basically is equivalent to what would be called the modern empirical scientific method, based on sense perception, and so imperfect, but inference, just like through direct sense perception, we might see the sun is a yellow circle in the sky about 3 inches in diameter. And maybe a little child would see it that way. But we see it's not a circle, but that's what our senses see. But we're seeing with the eyes of of science. No, and it's true. It's a stellar body, 1.4 million times the volume of the Earth, like that. So we're seeing through inferential empirical methods. So there's in Vedic epistemology, there's the 3 categories, and then there's subsets. Like there's one, which for me is interesting, because in our communication transformation programs, we focus a lot on nonverbal communication. So that's actually a form of epistemology called sesta in the Vedas. It means nonverbal gestures. We get a lot of knowledge from nonverbal gestures. So it's all very scientifically described. So that's a subset of pratyaksha. It's a subset of pratyaksha and anumana, the nonverbal communication. All right. So, okay. So where I was coming from is because, like, I grew up, like most, especially in the West, but all over the world. Like, okay, the empiric science. That's a knowledge. Like, I certainly didn't grow up with just accept what the Pope says or accept what the Bible says. I mean, that wasn't my upbringing. Secular humanism, some Reform Judaism in there. Get your bar mitzvah, get some nice gelt. Okay, so he relates. Okay, so right, but basically, science, that's the source of knowledge. And I remember in the early days, the first time I took Prashadam for many years under the guidance of Stambadas Prabhu, who's here in High Springs, back in 1988, 83, and then 84, I moved into the Bhakti Yoga Ashram in Ranana, outside of Tel Aviv, and then pretty soon Maya started to hit, and I would read Prabhupada's books and I'd have doubts, because it wasn't conforming with my understanding of the scientific worldview. I remember in those, and then I would ask devotees there. And they suggested, oh, you should write to Sadhaputta Prabhu, Dr. Richard Thompson. You should write to Sadhaputta. So he was based in Philadelphia at the time, and so he was a PhD in mathematics from Cornell University in New York. So his credentials. So I would write him letters. I remember and I expressed concerns. I remember his first letter to me. He said, Dear Bhakta Dev, obeisance is Jai Prabhupada. He wrote, your He wrote, your concerns are petty.
Whoa, what a crush.
Yeah. Can you believe it? And you might think that before he would just go into your concerns are petty, he'd do like a few sentences of empathic understanding or something. No, just your concerns are petty. Sadaputa. Maybe you detect still some resentment in my voice, but we won't. I'm not going to go into a whole therapy thing. But it was just like, what? But
I'm so much intelligent.
I'm very educated. But then he went on to explain why my concerns were petty, based on science and mathematics and Prabhupada's teachings. And so it was very enlightening for me. Not good for the false ego, but it was very enlightening. So as years and decades go on, so now it's kind of like, what we get from Srila Prabhupada, I accept that. And because my scientific intelligence, didn't have the intelligence, I got is completely satisfied. And then okay, so these other types of knowing, Anumana and Pratyaksha, they can assist Shabda Brahman, the knowledge coming from pure source. They can support, but they never supersede it. And they never supersede it. They never eclipse it. Okay. And at the same time, just here we're talking about life is everywhere, but everyone knows that you can't have life in that, under the glacier in Antarctica. Well, according to Krishna, you can. No, according to science, you can't. Well, now according to science, you can. We can't have life at those temperatures. That's like hundreds of degrees. Well, according to Krishna, you can. Yeah, that's not scientific. Oh, now according to science, you can. Okay, so you get where we're going with this. Yeah. So let's just say something. Okay. Let's go back. Say when I was born in the form of in this body of David Wolf, 1960. So 1950s, 1960s. Science, basic nutrition. Vegetarian diet won't work. You don't get enough protein and this and that. You need meat to be healthy. Okay. Now the Vedas are saying, no, actually, vegetarian diet for human beings would be the preferred diet on all levels, not just spiritual, also for physical health. Okay. So now, as decades go on, science is coming with, according to science, and you should listen to us, there's actually health advantages of a vegetarian diet, lots of them. You'll live longer and this and that. It's like, oh, okay, now I accept it, now I believe it. So we can just go into so many areas, so many areas. And where I could see that, okay, the modern empirical science, it's coming to validate the Vedas. Actually, a big chunk of my attempts at service the past 25 years, right? Let's say studying meditation techniques, okay? Specifically mantra meditation, okay? All right, so through empirical science, okay? Actually, these ancient meditations in the Vedas, listen to us, there's actually benefit there. Oh, really? So we could just accept the Vedas. Now, again, I'm giving myself to the empirical methods and to endeavor to investigate the assertions of the ancient Vedas in so many aspects of lifestyle, including meditation, diets, something like that. And one said, well, what you're saying, dear Govinda Das Devo, so you don't, we don't need those, but the world tends to be enamored with those methods. So in that way, we can co-create opening to this ancient wisdom, for the welfare of all, because meet people where they're at, and not just people. That's where I'm at, but I'm there a lot less now than 40 years ago. So, okay, so you're about life on other planets like this. So, a planet's full of various kinds of living beings. No planet is vacant. All right. Prabhupada talks a lot about like the moon. We talked about the sun here. Because like, in other words, like if they've already expanded by hundreds of degrees where life can exist, why not exist in the complete fiery planet like the sun? Okay. Yeah, I was just listening to a lecture, many lectures. Prabhupada compliments Professor Einstein, right? Because, so Einstein, he discovered the idea of time relativity. It's another example. Okay. So basically, and so Prabhupada will appreciate Einstein. And let's look at it. Like some of these ancient Vedas written by, those primitive cavemen in India a few thousand years ago. So they're talking about, 14 time dimensions. Oh, it must be mythology or something. Right, but then maybe about 100 years ago, you got, some brilliant human brain, Einstein, 120 years ago. And he said, like, actually, there's different time dimensions, based on speed and density and things like that. So basically, Prabhupada's saying, like, so the point is that now we believe it because Einstein says it, or like, actually, now we can accept vegetarianism because science says it. No, it's in the Vedas, and these other ways of knowing can support it. But where there's an apparent contradiction, I accept Srila Prabhupada every time. Mm-hmm. Okay. And again, when I was writing to Sadhuputta, I wasn't like that. Mm-hmm. But 99%, we find in that way. But Prabhupada say, look, even this great scientist, Professor Einstein, he's acknowledging time is relative. So we have that. Yeah, in the Brahma planet, time has this dimension, and the Pataloka time has so it's like that. So life on Earth. So it's a matter of consciousness. I remember in terms of like life on other planets. I was this was many. I mean, my daughter Sita. Maybe she was like 14, 15 years old. So it's like 18 years ago, like that. And she was asking me about this thing. So I gave her the example because she was doing some babysitting, child sitting at the time. Maybe some of you are a little concerned. Like, she was doing child sitting. No, she was. Okay. Anyhow, so I said, and where we were living then, there was land with a forest, few acres like that. So she would have like the little 2-year-olds, and she would sort of play like hide and seek around the trees. So I gave the example. Okay, so let's say that you're playing hide and seek, and if for the 2-year-old to find you in that forest, the 2-year-old will not find you unless you want them to. Maybe at some point it's like, here I am. Oh, I found Sita. So like, because your intelligence is far greater. Your intelligence is far greater. So the 2-year-old's only going to find you when you choose. So similarly, Prabhupada will talk about like, sure, there might be the moon in our 4-dimensional space, three spatial dimensions and a time dimension. Okay. And then, but then there's multi-dimensional space, and is that just some Vedic thing? No, according, if you look at the scientist theories of the Big Bang and the singularity, they say, well, in order to just get into the mathematics, you need to accept there's at least 10 dimensions that your senses have no access to. That's their math. Okay, so no, so it's whether it's Vedic or science. I only believe what I can see. Well, that's not a scientific paradigm. There's dimensions we have no access to, and that's exactly what the Vedas say. Modern science has come into that. Suppose say yeah. So there's like Chandra Loka, and to have access to that, we need a particular consciousness. Just like we need a particular type of body to enter into the realm of the fish. Okay, like that, to enter into there. As an example, we like to give. So let's say, about 3 months ago, I flew into the Zurich airport. Nandini's here. Okay, I flew into Switzerland. Right. So let's say when I go into Zurich, let's say I don't have the proper papers. In the metaphor, the papers are the consciousness. If I don't have the proper passport, I don't have the proper papers. So then they go, okay, well, then you can't pass through. Let's say I come back to America and someone says, oh, so you were in Zurich. Did you see Zurich? Tell me about Zurich. And I said, oh, well, Zurich, okay, well, there's these offices, there's offices with security guards. And then, then there's these big windows, and outside there's airplanes and runways. And then there's these waiting gates, and that's Zurich. I saw Zurich.
There's no light.
There's no light. Yeah, right. No sun. So oh no, Zurich. No, I saw a TV special about Zurich. Did you see the lakes? And there's some like medieval castles and churches. And I know Zurich's a whole financial capital. Were you in any of those big financial buildings, the banks, and maybe some factory for cheese or chocolate or something, or something like that? I go, no, I was in Zurich. There's none of that. There's no financial buildings. There's no lakes. There's no rivers. There's security offices. I was there. So in one sense, it's true. I was in Zurich, but I didn't have the proper papers to get in. So I didn't really get to see Zurich. All I saw was the airport. So that would be similar. Even if someone goes to, quote, the moon, we don't have the papers to see Chandraloka. So, all right. Yeah, so the Vedas are self-revealing, like the sun is self-luminous. It's like, to see the sun, get a flashlight. It's like, no, it's just, you don't get it. No, the sun is self-revealing, Bhagavatam self-revealing. And so, and it's so the process for this eternal knowledge that returns us. Okay, Anandini has a comment. I get it. We'll take you on a tour of Zurich next February. Okay, thank you. So, so the process to get this knowledge that really brings us peace and fulfillment, right? Again, those other processes can assist, but they can never eclipse, right? So the process is given tadvidi pranipatena paripashtena seva upatekshanti teginam ganinas tattvadarshina. That we approach a realized soul. We approach a realized soul. Vidura is approaching Maitreya, and Maharaj Parikshit's approaching Shukadev Goswami. So we get to approach A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. He's realizing all the truths of the Vedas, all the truths of self-realization. Tadviganartam sadgume vabhigachet. So we're advised that, first we're advised, make self-realization and developing love of God, love of Krishna. Make that the goal of your life. No force, but like we're encouraged by souls who are completely blissful and happy. Like, give up this desert life of trying to squeeze a few drops of superficial happiness out of material energy. Okay. So I said, okay, and then so if you want to make self-realization and awakening the natural bliss of the soul, Nishchasiddha Krishna Prema Sajika Branoy Shravanadi Shuddhachite Karya Udai, and awakening the natural bliss of the soul through love of Krishna, awakening to our original existence, our original nature, then okay, then approach a realized person. Right? You gave the example yesterday, Malini gave about, just like we want to learn mathematics, we'll approach an expert in mathematics. We want to learn to be really good in a sport, we'll approach an expert in tennis or golf, like that. So Tadvati, and question, pariprashnena sevaya, questioning, humble questioning, service, and approach in a humble state of mind, and then upadikshanti, that's diction, and then the self-realized soul, pleased by our attitude, reveals transformational, transcendental knowledge in our heart, and then we come to that. We move towards being Atmarama. Atmarama means self-satisfied. a bliss, a peace, a fulfillment, a security that's not dependent on anything external. As opposed to if we're dependent on the changing knowledge of, say, scientific theories, life can only, vegetarian diet won't work for you. Oh, now it will, like that. So I remember in my PhD studies, which was my dissertations entitled Effects of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra on Stress, Depression, and the Three Gunas. And so we did a whole literature review on what's been studied on meditation, on spiritual approaches. So one particular study that stays with me almost 30 years later was a study by a medical researcher. His name was William Byrd, and it was published in some medical journal. And it was a study on the effects of prayer. So it was a double-blind study. You had heart patients who were suffering from heart disease and maybe some heart surgery, recuperating. And outside the hospital, there was a group praying to God for the health of one group of heart patients, but not for the other group. The patients, he sounds like it's unethical to do that. But so the patients didn't know whether they were being prayed for. The medical staff didn't know who was being prayed for. So it was double blind. It was quite a rigorous study. And the results were very clear with strong statistical significance. Those who were being prayed for recovered quickly. Okay. So the study clearly indicates praying to God really helps heart health. Okay. Now, what's particularly fascinating for me about that study is that you never heard of it, unless you heard me tell the story before. It's in my dissertation. See, that's the fascinating part. Because let's say if back there, the study was conducted, I think, in 1989. Let's say if 1989, to improve recovery from heart surgery or heart health, they tried some new pharmaceutical drug, and they got the same level of results or even less. Like immediately there'd be like millions of dollars. There'd be TV ads. There'd be people in nice suits with briefcases going into Shands Hospital, to give this drug to the doctors, give to their patients.
Yeah.
That's just true, right? But the results of this study is like, pray to God. All right, let's just bury that somewhere. Let's just bury that, because clearly there's a bias there. Right? So there's a bias. Okay, there's a bias in academia. Like we indicated that about half an hour ago, and because the idea of science is objective. We've just given one example amongst millions. It's not. It's not. Right? Yeah, because if that same study, same parameters, was about a new drug, no, they would have. This should be in Time magazine, but let's just bury it. Okay. And because if there's the illusion of objectivity when objectivity is not really there, then we're never going to look at the shadows and the deceptions. Okay, so Vedas are self-revealing, and the process to unlock is to approach bona fide guru, bona fide teacher. So we had the opportunity to approach Srila Prabhupada for true diksha, transformational, transcendental knowledge, and that's of course, then we say that the foundational instruction Prabhupada gives us is to, as much as possible, chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I'll read this verse again, Canto 3, Chapter 5, Text 8. Yes, Tatra Deder Adi Lokanato, Lokana Lokan Sahaloka Palan. Achi Klipad Yatra Hi Sarva Sattva Nikaya Bedo, Dikrita Pratita. The Supreme King of all kings has created different planets and places of habitation where living entities are situated in terms of the modes of nature and work, and he has created their different kings and lords. Hare Krishna, thanks for your presence and listening. I welcome at this time if anyone would like to share any comments or realizations or ask any questions. Gajendra Prabhu.
Well, thank you for the interesting class. It was anything but petty, the discussion.
Hare Krishna.
What was the use?
I was just thanking Govinda for the class because it was anything but petty.
So I made some progress. So I made some progress in
Yeah.
40 years.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
It's a few different comments because
Yeah.
it was all really interesting. About the living entities, being everywhere.
Yeah.
I understand the main thrust of it is about sort of where we take knowledge, where how we look for knowledge.
Yeah.
But it is interesting.
Very
in
interesting
terms
topic,
of,
very interesting.
Studying using our intelligence,
Yeah.
spiritually guided from higher source to learn about these things, and because we receive that insight from source, we're not just blindly trying to figure it out, but we kind of have it's something there to begin to wrap our observation
To give
information
to give us the
into
context.
very valuable. Even if we don't fully understand and realize things, it's important just to open our ears to that guidance and put that in there. The living entity is about the heat. As I remember it, it was related to volcanic activity. And it had to, the specific one I read about is, as islands and things are created, there are these, the vents are underwater. And the level of intensity, where like the underwater lava is kind of not just running out the top, but it's unbelievable. It's not like, water boils at 220 and we're looking at like 700 or 800 degrees. It's intense beyond belief. And then the other day I was reading, and so another place, and this kind of really connects to the verse where it talks about like places where the sun doesn't even reach. You're saying like, well, yeah, even on this planet. And so the really deep places on these planets are there's trenches. They like the ocean floor is just a flat plain. There's really deep trenches. And they discovered some new fish down there. Like at 27,000
below.
feet. And they have actually sent there.
Do you mean that?
Timid could be Timigala.
It's down. It's just one. And so, it's interesting because up here above the surface, the sunlight you can see very, very far, but actually in the ocean, if you're a diver, you realize actually pretty quickly it starts getting dark. Even at 100 feet, it's starting to get darker. At 200 feet, it's pretty dark already. We're talking 27,000 feet. And it's almost like a different planet down there.
Look at that. There's no sunlight.
There's a lot down there that we don't even know because they kind of stay down there.
There's no way to
occasionally something might make its way to the surface and walk up on the beach, but it's just really a different mystery. But no sunlight is reaching at all, and there's still these
living entities.
So in terms, this is something I hope it's relatable, like in terms of what people are open to so it's like you're talking about, like, there is this sort of mentality about what science is and where people in general are willing to validate, like they need to see it, or they have their sort of sets of what they put their faith in, like the modern scientific community, the books, what's being said in the universities and stuff like that. And I look at that in terms of it's its own sangha. It's the societal material sangha where there's association that's creating a lot of influence. And there is sort of like a collective consciousness in a way that can lends toward people having that mentality. And it can be a little hard to resist. And if I may, I'll just give this little tiny example because I went to India. Discovered a whole nother way about thinking about money. Because like in America, there's a kind of liberalness, you know, you do something, somebody helps you. I mean, you don't even think about giving a tip, $5, $10 or something like that. In India, everything is a negotiation in the deal you can get. And even though I felt like I'm just a very easy, generous person, I want to give more. It's like, I'm literally like trying to buy a mango in India. And we're talking about what would be a few pennies.
A few pennies, literally.
And like literally negotiations are breaking down and it's becoming an intense situation. And I'm thinking, what is going on? Who is this person that's doing this? Because it's like, I just couldn't even, it's like, India is so powerful in India. Like, I'm doing it. I'm doing it. And so we live in this society that's really kind of, people are caught up in this almost a collective consciousness about how they think about these things. Not just what's being said or taught, but they feel like there's actually an energy field, which makes it that much more, I think, amazing if someone can even tap into proper sources and find association that will actually help them get a what we would consider to be a more direct and true and real understanding, or just to have openness. And there are also, you know, it's not all one out there in the scientific community, because I mean, there are people that I would just, you know, I can just say they're very atheistic, they're into their humanism in such a way, and very ridicule of anything, you know, spiritual or theistic. And there are also scientists that, I mean, not necessarily devotees, or even coming from the Christian intelligent design, but their minds are open, and they're literally like, they understand so much. Just a little bit of a sort of like, they see the soul's amazing. Like, even if they can't formulate with the words, it's just like
they see this,
they're realizing there's something amazing here. And they're literally just saying, like, we practically don't know anything. We're just standing, just kind of made it to the shore of the ocean, you know. And so it's pretty amazing. I want to just close by saying, for people that are interested in these things, there is the Bhaktivedanta Institute that Prabhupada wanted, the devotees that are scientific and intellectual, and they're still existing. And I've had some information recently from the Bhaktivedanta Institute. They've actually relocated to this area, and there's some new energy. It's been reinvigorated lately, and it's really interesting. They've been having, I don't know how many more there are, but a kind of lecture series in the name of Sadhaput. And some of it's really interesting. And at the very least, it's, you know, I'm just like, wow, these Prabhus are really dedicated and unbelievably educated and intelligent, and really on it. So that's how.
Thank you, Gajendra Prabhu. Thanks for your sharing so much. And Prabhupada was certainly very much in favor of science. Science in its essence, it's really about, you know, an open-minded spirit of discovery. An open-minded spirit of discovery for truth. So it's a wonderful human endeavor. and Prabhupada established the Bhaktivedanta Institute. So that's different than scientism, or what science has become known. It's just like a dogmatic attachment to believing this and not that. But the essence of science, like if we get into, you're talking about modern day, whether they identify as devotees, there's so many in that spirit, but like the really, really great science, Einstein, Newton, Galileo, Copernicus, they all got like, there's this awesome higher intelligence, they all got that, and then there was so much in the spirit of discovery. So that's the essence. And yeah, and since Prabhupada established Bhaktivedanta Institute, and then starting late 70s into the 80s, it kind of went into different branches, and the current, I'll call it the Gainesville branch, is basically about rejuvenating what was the Sadhaputta branch. Sadhaputta passed away in 2008. And I'd completely forgiven him by that time. Okay, so the Gainesville branch. When I say branches, it doesn't mean like division. I mean, it's just it's like unification and diversity, and just different inspirations. How to explore the Vedic the Vedic sciences in the modern day. Different inspirations. So the different branches are kind of to be expected, but there's unification. Yeah, and then there's Rasaraj Prabhu in Bombay. He has a branch, and the followers of Bhakti Swarup Damodar Goswami, and Bhakti Swarup Damodar Goswami, he developed more like a cultural presentation. Mm-hmm. Like he would serve prasadam to Nobel Prize winners, and then they would be open, and that was kind of his approach. It wasn't so much like hard hinting, here's the flaws, and see different. Judah Karma Prabhu has a branch, the archaeology. So what's happening in Gainesville with Krishni and Brahmatirtha, it's rejuvenating the Sadhaputta efforts books, because this lecture series you're talking about, it's kind of each lecture takes a chapter from mechanistic and non-mechanistic science, which is, I've read it twice. It's like it's a wonderful book, and just kind of expanding that chapter like that. So thank you, Gajendra. Any other comments or questions, or Malini?
I don't have a question, but it's I like to look at history.
Yeah.
And historically speaking, Dharma was there in humanity. Like if we look at the European history, the church had a very, very important place. And then there was a time where people were believing the church more than they were believing a scientist.
Yeah.
Like that. And all those great scientists you're speaking about, they all believe in God.
Yeah.
And that was their frame of reference. And it seems that the transition is kind of modern history that transition was done.
Yeah.
And I often think about how science got its power, because now science have a lot of power.
A lot of power.
I know I have my daughter is in the medical field, and I give her remedies that are in the Veda or in science from Chinese medicine that come ancient. 5,000 years, 3,000 years, very ancient.
Yeah.
And like because she went to school, I know that our frame of reference is only whatever. It's not scientifically proven. There is no study about that. Right. Constantly like, well, okay. Sometimes they are making study, like things that I told her that turmeric.
Yeah.
So now it's like a big thing in even they have done study about it, but of course they haven't done study about everything. And like it seems to me that all that is connected with the washing machine and the automobile.
To make life more comfortable.
It seems that it's so like Shudra or like not Brahmanical what's happened with science. And now science got the power of people's faith. People put their faith in science not based on knowledge and Brahmanical coming from a place of wanting to know the truth. The faith was acquired by pharmaceutical, by washing machine, by automobiles. And so we give you all that.
So you must believe us.
And we are God now.
We
are God now, not the church. The church didn't give you automobiles or washing machine or dishwasher or pharmaceuticals that you can just take a pill and continue whatever you were doing, eating what you want to eat, using life the way you want to use it, because we have the pill for that. Or like any pain, like it's such a society of avoiding pain instead of allowing pain to be productive and supporting self-realization. It's like we have solution for all your pain, and now we have your face, and now we can speak about things that look Brahmanical, like where human being come from, or where life come from, or the creation of the universe, and you're going to believe us because you have faith in us. So I was just like, it seems that there is an evolution that was based on gross material comfort and avoidance of pain.
Thanks very much for all that. Thank you. Was it Melanie? We've given you the toaster oven.
Oh, toaster oven, I forgot. A microwave.
We've given you the microwave, so you should accept that life began in the primordial soup when atoms crashed like that. So it's like, well, I appreciate the toaster oven, but it's kind of a leap of faith there that I'm not willing to take. That's it. And then you gave some, so because what was going on in many parts of the world in the name of religion, there wasn't much of a scientific basis. And then you had like religious, spiritual people like Newton, Descartes, Leibniz, and they wanted, I won't go into the whole psychology of all these people, but basically they wanted to preserve people's trust in the King of the Kings and the King of the King of the Kings. And so they made it based on math and that, but it started a slippery slope, and then modernism went into Darwin, Marx, and Freud, and that sort of thing. But so but the great ones were all very theistic. Einstein, like that. And then you mentioned because of course recently in terms of here's the modern science. You're some sort of primitive if you're not taking the vaccine. We're not going to a vaccine, but there were different drugs that were scientifically proven. I think it was in the 40s, even early 50s. Parents were giving their children DDT to protect them from malaria. Right? And then and there were different. According to there were, you could see advertisements 1920s, 1930s, like if you're a singer, smoke these brands of cigarettes. Smoking this type of tobacco, it'll improve your singing voice. Science. Beef is the new health food. And they'll have scientific study. So, or you mentioned different remedies. So there's the allopath. So the Ayurvedic recipe. Probably everyone here knows more than me about Ayurveda, but basically, so I don't know the details, but all the Ayurvedic remedies, they weren't tested by torturing mice and rabbits, but they're revealed just like the Bhagavatam is revealed. Now, of course, what from these ancient medical sciences, what comes down in the modern day that's true, and what is quackery, because there is quackery going on in the name of these ancient sciences, that's true too. But at least in principle, just like this knowledge is revealed. So similarly with the Ayurveda, this was revealed by great sages, coming from the king of the kings, and so like they didn't need to like. It's proven because we tortured mice, which is basically the modern way to do it. Hare Krishna.
Wow. I'll see if I can put this down, because what Mother Lee is bringing up about, the machines and this idea of just scientists and the comfort. I thought this was really fascinating. So recently, I learned about an experiment that was done beginning in the late 60s to the early 70s by the scientist. His last name is Calhoun. The experiments are known as Universe 25. Are you familiar with Universe 25?
I don't think so.
Okay. So mice were used in this experience. Didn't necessarily want to kill the mice, but none of them survived.
Yeah.
So it was about something of a social experiment.
Okay, I'm familiar with it now. Please
You are.
Continue.
So he was trying to create this mouse utopia.
Yeah.
So normally a mouse is having its struggle for existence, to find food, to not get eaten by birds or snakes, to find whatever materials it needs to make a home. So he's providing everything.
Paradise for
just to make it so easy. He put in his initial mice.
Yeah.
And of course, they have this wonderful environment, and they begin to mate, and there's more population increase that's mating. After a certain period of time, and the place is getting busier, all of a sudden the population growth of the community began to level off. And then these really strange behaviors started coming out of the mice. And it really struck me, because some of the behaviors were very social, like the certain males would go off in a certain way, and they were known as the beautiful mice, and they didn't want to really bother with the female mice. They didn't want to mate. They just wanted to like eat and sleep. Other mice would become kind of dominant and try to like really, they would stake out a territory and control it and keep the others out. Females would withdraw, and they also would not want to mate, and they would go. So, and it really struck me, because being aware of a lot of things that are happening in the current modern world, with even things like what's happening with genders and stuff like that, like some of the mice would come up with homosexual tendencies, and it's almost like, well, there it is, like there is a relation between humans and mice, not only like trying to figure out that vaccines but what happens. And it says something about urbanization and people getting too busy, not having space. But even though everything is provided, even though like now we have government that like free cell phones, free this, like trying to, and yet all these strange behaviors and social relationships are coming out, and people aren't happy because they're not only are they not focusing on God, but a part of that is there's a natural inclination to be healthy as a human being, to experience a certain amount of challenge and austerity that's built into the spiritual path. And even just that part missing creates these issues. So I'm just throwing that in there, just do with it what you will, but it relates to all this stuff. And for me personally, it was a huge impact, because in my service, which is very much non-urban, it's about reconnecting people more to simplicity in nature. And I just witness just these amazing experiences people have that they want to talk about and share about, just withdrawing from
the busyness.
just the the intensity of the modern urbanization and all the machines and all this and that, like just to step into just to even slightly simple living, high thinking, it's dramatic in what's happening.
Hare
So
Krishna.
anyways, it's just a huge mess science, I think science has created.
So what's
and
happened?
technology has created when it's not properly directed.
You said they all died. What's happened?
Oh, yeah, I mean, within a few years. So the behaviors of the mice became so damaged that even after the population was
And
declining.
You mean behaviors that mice in the wild will not have?
Excuse me?
You mean they develop behavior that were not seen in mice that were just living mice life in a wild?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the thing that was really profound is even as the population was declining and you think, well, there's more space now, things would level off, that there is actually the damage of that experience was so deep that it never recovered. Like the younger mice, the generations, they were just completely dysfunctional. And they were literally like damaged. And so even when there's like all that and only like 10 mice instead of 1,000, it's like they could not survive. And finally just the last mouse survived.
Quite a mirror to the human experience. Yeah. Yeah. Right. So Tapo Divyam Puchaki Nasadvam Shuddhya Yasmad Brahmasakam Tvanatam. Human life's meant to voluntarily do austerity for truly spiritual purposes, for that benefit that'll never be annihilated by time. And otherwise, if we got the eating, sleeping, mating, defending taken care of, and we just use it for better toaster ovens, then it becomes a whole tragedy. And it becomes a whole tragedy. And the idea is, sure, yeah, let's take care of eating, sleeping, mating, defending without like an unduly hard struggle. Take care of that. And then with that time and energy, use it for self-realization, God consciousness. That's the perfection.
And not creating comfort. It seems that like the part of like avoiding pain is like the most damaging. And I saw that in France. In France, a lot of people are unemployed and they don't really want to be employed because the government gives them money, the socialist government, and they are dysfunctional.
Just like the mice, they make
so
it
dysfunctional because they are not facing the hardship. There is hardship. We always will experience hardship physically, mentally, interpersonally. And if we have a pill for each of the hardship, then we'll finish like the mice. And there is a pill, there is chemistry, there is so many things for each of the hardship, pill in different form. And it's amazing. Thank you. Thank you both for that.
Thanks for bringing it.
You said something, and it's just
the Universe 25. I wasn't familiar, but I heard about those mice experiments. Anandini.
Hare Krishna, thank you. It's very enlivening, this discussion, like your class and the discussion. And I'm just like looking at what, you're speaking of science, and I was looking at the field of education and what is happening there and what has been happening. And it's, just interesting that Malini mentioned automobile and washing machine, and you mentioned toaster. I think that all goes back to industrialization. And Srila Prabhupada, I read about him, making comments in factories and how unnecessary things are produced in factories. And in education, like that's when or at least here, the public schools started, because parents needed to work, and so kids needed to go somewhere to be schooled, and they wanted good workers. So the whole education system was about not like, I don't know, covering the intelligence, covering the free will, covering the self, responsibility and all of that. And now today it's a problem in a sense, and it's a good problem, because at school there's need for change, because more and more kids are, instead of changing the system, they want to, all the kids, more than half of the kids go to therapy to get, like, so they fit into the system. And it's, for me, it's like the kids are like waking us up and saying, hey, we need to change. And there's a like a strong wave here in Switzerland, at least, with alternative schooling.
Yeah.
Like homeschooling, and small schools open up everywhere. And if I look at them, like, I would say 80%, they bring in the spiritual aspect. We need to take care of the soul of those kids. And I know more and more kids who are, like in the public school system, they're labeled as in some way handicapped. They need the diagnosis, the disease. And when they go to a different school or have a teacher that looks at them as a spirit soul and tries to bring out their intelligence and their free will and encourages all of that, they are no longer handicapped children, or like they're not, nothing's wrong with them. So I was just contemplating on that.
Thanks for your contribution, Anandini. Thanks for that comment.
Yeah.
Just to support everything Prabhupada gives us, but I'm hearing your comment, I'm reminded there's a book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. He's the founder of logotherapy, because you mentioned therapy. So, because there's the core drive is sex, the core drive is security, like that. But he's saying actually the core drive, and he's channeling some Vedic wisdom here. The core drive for humans is meaning. And you're being educated to work in a factory as an engineer or employer to produce toaster ovens. In itself, I mean, the zeros can all have value. Toaster ovens have value and cars have value. But without the one in front, without the one in front, if it's all just random collisions of atoms, then everyone's going to need therapy. But then if the therapists don't know how to support people to connect with higher meaning, self-realization, service to God, then it's going to be universe 25.
Yeah.
And so even if we got the comforts, and Prabhupada would see some like the American universities, beautiful campuses like that, and you would hear, and the students are going to the top of the tallest building and jumping off.
Wow.
Right, because and that would make Prabhupada very sad. I mean, there's very dark humor in it, because it's so much comfort, and there's education, and and then how come they're becoming hippies? How come they're killing themselves? Because we want meaning, not just like let's search for meaning to feel romantic about it, but we know to really who am I? What happens after death? That's real education. Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you. Hare Krishna.